The paintwork is quite soft and does not resist the appearance of minor damage, such as scratches and chips. With the quality of the metal of the body panels, things are not so bad, galvanized, but age is taking its toll and specimens with rotten thresholds and a tailgate are already increasingly common. Also, foci of corrosion can be found on the bottom of the doors, the windshield frame, the edge of the hood, and the roof. In rare cases, the edges of the arches and the places around the door handles corrode. When inspecting a car from below, special attention should be paid to the seams of the threshold amplifiers, arches, beam. Cracks may appear due to corrosion of the central part and the attachment points of the suspension parts. It is worth noting that the bottom is poorly treated with anti-corrosive from the factory, so additional processing is highly recommended. A common phenomenon is the corrosion of the floors in the cabin and trunk. This trouble is caused by the presence of moisture, which appears when the pipes of the stove are leaking. The appearance of moisture in the rear, as a rule, is caused by corrosion in the rear arch. Another weak spot is the cups of the front suspension shock absorbers. Due to poor body design, dirt and moisture accumulate in the seam area, which lead to corrosion and fatal damage. Inspect. The seams of the cup should be carefully, and not only from above, but also from below, since the cost of an error is quite high. As for the body equipment, it should be noted here that the plastic of the head optics is not very successful. It quickly becomes cloudy and fog lights. There is also a complaint about the reliability of door handles, which often pop out of their seats when the doors are opened. Fortunately, it is not difficult to insert them into place. Seals, hinges, and door locks do not differ in margin of safety. It is also worth highlighting the low quality of the plastic from which the bumpers are made, and the fastening of the lower anther of the engine compartment, often lost. Powertrains. The list of units available for the Citroen C3 consists of 1.1, 21 JP, 60 HP, 1.4, 23A or 23 JP, 75 HP, 1.6 liter, 25 JP4, 109 HP, gasoline ICE, and a turbodiesel 1.4 HDI, DV4, 68 and 90 HP, and 1.6 DV6, 109 HP. The main disadvantage of this model is a small engine compartment, which affected the efficiency of the cooling system, even with a slight contamination of the radiator, especially in cars with air conditioning. When overheated, the valve stem seals tan, and an oil burner appears. You can also note the short service life of the hoses of the crankcase ventilation system. Due to the fact that the BSM unit is located in the engine compartment, it is impossible to wash the motor from the hose, since moisture on the unit can result in a costly repair. If you cannot do without cleaning, this operation should be carried out with special cleaning compounds or steam, and only from the timing side. Another of the common problems is the short resource of engine mounts, where is manifested by increased vibrations, and the anti-pollution fault gasoline engine control system periodically fails, manifested by an increase in fuel consumption and a decrease in dynamics. Gasoline engines are representatives of the same series and have identical weaknesses. The timing is endowed with a belt drive with a prescribed service interval of 90,000 kilometers. However, it is better to replace the belt a little earlier, since if it breaks, the pistons will meet the valves. Since hydraulic compensators are not provided for this engine, when knocks appear from under the hood, it is necessary to adjust the valve clearances. Among the shortcomings of the internal combustion engine, one can single out the unreliability of the ignition system, sensors, and the tendency to suck air at the intake through the seals of the nozzles and sensors. It is also worth noting the tendency of the throttle assembly to become dirty, revs float. A fairly common problem is a malfunctioning thermostat and corrosion of the oil pan. If the rust that has appeared is not removed in time, in the future, you will have to change the pallet to a new one. The piston group with proper maintenance takes care of about 300,000 kilometers. Citroen C3 with a DV4 and DV6 diesel engine is rare on the secondary, and as a rule, has twisted runs. As for weaknesses, it is worth noting the capriciousness of the common rail system and the high cost of its repair. For vehicles with a Delphi fuel system, fuel injectors and high-pressure fuel pumps are considered a weak point. Bosch fuel equipment is more reliable, but the dosing unit often fails in it. Another disadvantage of these engines is the unreliability of the VKG membrane, crankshaft damper pulley, and turbine. At the 1.6 engine, Nozzle seals quickly burn out and cylinder liners are prone to corrosion. The disadvantages include the extremely inconvenient location of the fuel filter, which is why some owners try to change it as rarely as possible, which negatively affects the fuel equipment. The engine life declared by the manufacturer is 250,000 kilometers. Transmission for the Citroen C3, 3 types of gearboxes are available: 5-speed manual B4, 4-speed automatic AL4, and Senso drive robot. Due to the low weight of the car and the low power of the internal combustion engine, there are no special problems with a manual gearbox. An exception can only be versions with chipped 1.6-liter engines. Bearings wear out by 150,000 kilometers. For other versions, gearbox repair is required closer to 200,000 kilometers. Oil seals begin to flow. Synchronizers wear out. After 200,000 run, many have a slight howl in 5th gear. Of the minor troubles, there is a tendency to souring the gear selection mechanism and drive cables. The resource of an automatic transmission largely depends on the purity of the oil and heat exchanger. Since the heat exchanger here is small, even its slight contamination can lead to overheating with subsequent serious breakdowns. Plastic and rubber parts are destroyed. The valve body is bent. A lot of problems can be caused by worn bushings or cylindrical plain bearings, which act as seals, the wear of which leads to a decrease in lubrication pressure. In the presence of an ailment, the oil pump switches to the maximum performance mode, as a result of which not only its resources reduced, but also the solenoids. Closer than 150,000 kilometers, an electronic control unit, a torque converter, needle bearings, a brake band may require attention. Another disadvantage is the tendency of the box to leak. The automatic transmission resource is 250,000 kilometers. The robotic gearbox is one of the most capricious transmissions of the model. Most often, the gearbox fails the clutch, gears and clutch motor, gear selection mechanism, and control electronics. Often require repair without having served even 100,000 kilometers. To prolong the life of these parts, it is recommended that the clutch be initialized periodically. As for the reliability of the mechanical part of the gearbox, the problems here are the same as in the mechanics of before. Since the cost of repairing the robot is high, in case of significant breakdowns, this box is converted into a conventional MCP. The chassis is endowed with a classic suspension architecture with MacPherson struts on the front and a torsion beam at the rear. Despite the light weight of the Citroen C3, the reliability of the suspension parts leaves much to be desired. Springs are considered the most problematic here, in which extreme turns can break off by 100,000 kilometers. It is worth noting that this breakdown often leads to damage to the wiring of the ABS sensor and the brake line. Silent blocks of levers also serve quite little, 60–90,000 kilometers. Less than 100,000 kilometers usually withstand the anthers of the CV joints and the supports of the front struts. The rest of the parts can last up to 150,000 km. Separately, it is worth highlighting the hubs, which painfully endure long downtime and shocks. The steering system uses a rack and pinion mechanism with an EUR mounted on a shaft in the engine compartment. As for the reliability of the rail, bushings and anthers are the fastest to fail here. If they are leaking, there is a high probability of rust on the rod. Particular attention must be paid to the wiring of the amplifier motor. Owners of the Citroen C3 released before restyling often noted the presence of play in the steering. The brakes are reliable. The only thing that can cause inconvenience is the parking brake mechanisms in the calipers. They turned sour over the years. In terms of electronics, the ABS unit is considered problematic, in which, due to an unsuccessful location, the case and contacts often rot. It is also worth monitoring the cleanliness of the ABS sensors, as they are poorly protected from dirt over time. They can begin to fail. Salon and electrical equipment. Although the salon is made of inexpensive materials, even for copies of the first years of production, it generally looks good. Of the elements that are most subject to wear, the steering wheel rim, gear lever, and door handles should be distinguished. Seat upholstery also wears out relatively quickly, especially under overall drivers. As for the reliability of interior equipment, there is nothing special to break here, since even the top trim levels have rather poor equipment. Among the shortcomings, one can single out unsuccessful seals of the stovepipes. With time they begin to let liquid through, and a weak air conditioner radiator. But the electrician, despite the simplicity of the car, can cause a lot of problems with age. Most often, BSI, BSM blocks and power surges lead to failures, which lead to errors in the motor and not only able to complicate life and the system of multiplex technologies MUX, failures in which lead to incorrect operation of the air conditioner, central locking, power steering, and engine temperature sensor. To solve the problem, you need to install new software. It is better to install new software at an authorized service center. On a car without air conditioning, the fan control unit often fails in the event of a malfunction of which the motor will only work at the lowest speed. Another disadvantage is a generator equipped with a relay regulator that works with a low-speed LIN bus. When replacing the battery, it is necessary to flash the brains. Despite the elderly age of the Citroen C3, it can be safely considered for purchase in the secondary market, since this model is devoid of significant shortcomings. When choosing a car on the secondary, be sure to check the electronics with a diagnostic scanner. Avoid cars with a washed engine compartment and a robotic gearbox. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.